As some of you might already know, uh, this is the Vietnamese national costume, áo dài. It's quite simply just a high-collared, closely fitted shirt. However, its front and back panels only connect up to the waist and extend way down to the ankle. I was fine wearing this national costume. I was fine wearing this national costume into all manners of national holidays, and I grew up seeing everyone around wear it also, to school, to work, to weddings, and you would think that such extensive exposure to such a costume would make somebody automatically appreciate it, right? But no, I did not like my Vietnamese national costume very much. I held self-deprecating views towards the áo dài, most of which were criticisms that I had picked up from other people in the Vietnamese community. The national costume looked too much like the Chinese one. It's not Vietnam's own product. It's bothersome and conservative, and it's very hot, and it gets stuck everywhere. But unfortunately for my sentiments against the national costume, my middle school loved it. In fact, for every single Teacher's Day, they would have the students each decorate their own áo dài and then host an entire catwalk for everyone to just showcase it off for the whole school to see. And this was the single biggest artistic competition at my school every single year. So as a kid who liked arts and crafts, I simply could not let that opportunity go. So I entered into the competition and I found it incredibly fun because I could exercise my creative skills and I could collaborate with my friends to come up with something that outdid the last design, and I just really enjoyed the experience. So I did the áo dài competition, but I definitely looked past the áo dài component of it. So as you can see here, this is my creation from 7th grade. This is from 8th grade, and that's from 9th grade. So then when 10th grade rolled around and I moved away from public school into international high school, I just felt empty because there were no such artistic competitions like this anymore. So what should I do now to fill this creative void? Funnily enough, I fell back into something that I was familiar with, and that's the áo dài. Well, I still don't know why I did it. What do you do when you simply don't know what to do next? You just fall back into something that you've been doing all this time. And so in a creative mindset, I thought that I would come up with something more challenging. I'd put a new spin on it. And I decided that I could sew the costume itself this time, instead of just putting new designs on it and decorating it. And I knew that I wasn't a tailor, so I stuck to making doll-sized versions of it. And I thought that if I could succeed, then I'd end up with a relatively presentable collection to show off to people. But that's way easier said than done. I looked for instructions, but there were none because tailors in Vietnam, they all have their own unique way of making áo dài, even though it has this very distinctive shape. But there's no single pattern that applies to everyone and that is universal. So there were no instruction to be found anywhere, and they would all keep their trade secrets to the grave. So on that note, I tried turning to dressmaking books because if the áo dài had a unique way of being made, then I should come up with my own too. So with every single problem that arose like that, I learned to try and improvise as I go, as well as reach out to experts every single time. When I didn't know where to get aoyai materials, I would turn to people in the reconstruction movement, and they'd redirect me to local artisan fabric producers. And when I didn't know like if my costume was historically accurate enough, I'd pick up history books and then try my best to stay true to their description of aoyai's form and colors. Here is some of my process. I learned from dressmaking books how to make darts and raglan sleeves, which is what makes the aoyai closely fitted as you see here. And it brought a whole new awesome discipline to me of learning how to bring flat 2D material together in order to make something three-dimensional. I really enjoyed the learning process of that. But the funny thing is, I had no idea that I would take this project far more seriously than I had intended to. I knew that I was signing up for a couple dozen sleep-deprived nights, and I knew that I would need to blow through like 100 ugly prototypes in order to arrive at something that looked satisfactory. And in other words, I knew that the menial and tedious labor part of it was going to take ages, and I was stubborn enough to be up for it. But what fascinated me was that my preconceived understanding would be completely reversed just because I chose this subject to work on. And as I read up on the aoyai's history, my fascination grew, and I wanted to expand my collection to show the aoyai's evolution across time. I'll just walk you through a bit of the things that I found out during my learning process. So back when Vietnam was under Chinese influence, there were two main ideas in circulation. The first is Zhonghua, and the second is Huaxia. Zhonghua means that the center of the universe is made up of civilized royalty and nobility who controlled all of the culture, and they would spread it to their citizens. That went hand in hand with Huaxia, which meant that beautiful, dignified costume, when you wear it, it could communicate your virtue to other people, and that was how culture spread. So the Vietnamese nobility adopted these two ideologies with some minor modifications, and they brought it into the aoyai, which is why you see this sort of similarity in the costumes. Vietnam also shared the cross collar, similar to Chinese costume, but it was also long, loose, and multi-layered. Because it's multi-layered, it means that you could sit under the sweltering hot sun and then just perspire through all the layers without worrying that the outer, most regal and pristine, beautiful layer would ever become soiled. So I thought that was a really cool idea, so I made it into this early form of aoyai. As you can see here, it has really long and loose sleeves, and then it connects to the bodice, and it has multiple layers. When Vietnam was under French influence, this was the second big era that aoyai underwent a change. Under French influence, Vietnamese people learned that fashion should enhance the natural silhouette of a woman. So they began adopting a more tightly fitted silhouette with a high collar and a cinched waist to elongate the look of a woman's body. So these are the works of the artist Cat Tung. And as you can see, the aoyai is now cut in an hourglass shape. Even though darts and raglan sleeves weren't here yet, it still greatly minimized the shape of the aoyai. And because it was now closer to skin, people had also to make it out of thinner fabric so that perspiration could still happen. And then the decision to keep it with long pants was to ensure that people still had a full range of motion to accommodate their labor-intensive and really active lifestyle of Vietnamese people. On the left hand of the photo right here, you can see the first generation of when French influence just entered, and on the right-hand side, you can see that Ao has begun to settle into its current shape. Rag-on sleeves began replacing connected sleeves and became the signature sleeve of Ao. As you can see in this doll right here. And all of this information proved to me that no matter what influence the Vietnamese Ao was in, it was always optimized to fit Vietnamese lifestyles. And this is the final generation, which is also the most modern one of Ao. Some of the best Ao in this generation was made of silk, and new innovations such as the boat line and the boat neckline were invented to replace the high collar. And in keeping with the original cross-shaped ideology, Ao was still fastened on one side. However, as time went on, people found it easier to put zippers at the back for just easier fastening. And so after reading all of the information in history books, I recognized that Ao had its similarities with other national costumes, but it was still Vietnam's own product. It had synthesized the best, most admirable ideas from its French influences, but it has never let those influences overshadow or overpower Vietnamese tradition and lifestyle. And all of my preconceived understandings of Ao were completely reversed, and with renewed excitement, I picked up this project again, expanded to have early and modern forms, so you can see the evolution of the costume through time. And it took me 2 years to end up with a satisfactory collection of dolls, as you have just seen here. And earlier, the summer of this year, I did an exhibition at a local fair for the first time. And here I was telling the story of Ao, of how it persevered and adapted to all these foreign influences throughout time. But then I instinctively realized I couldn't tell the story without constantly linking back to myself, linking back to my personal struggle of accepting this national costume, and also with my creative process and journeying throughout the very difficult labor of making these dolls. I finally learned to embrace this national costume as a beautiful and pride-worthy part of my culture. And I finally accepted it as part of my own identity. And in showing it off to people and showing all the work that I've done, I think for the first time ever, I've gained ownership of a part of my culture. So as this talk comes to an end, I just encourage you to give something previously overlooked a second chance. Dive deeply into it. Find something that's hidden from view and try to gain better understanding of the subject that you're interested in. But most importantly, stick to it to the very end, because you might just learn that it's something worth appreciating and convert to being its ardent advocate. Thank you for listening.